Welcome back to Meeting Point English, and in this grammar lesson we are talking about futures, different ways of talking about the future. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can leave a comment below as well if you wish. So in this video we will be talking about using the modal auxiliary verb will to talk about the future. There is also the going to structure with the verb to be plus going plus a to infinitive. Then we have two present tenses, the continuous and the simple, which can both be used to talk about the future, and the be plus to infinitive structure. So to begin with, let's look at some examples. Will. He will buy some bread. They will pay the bill. I will open the window. So the first thing to notice is that with the auxiliary modal verb will, we have the bare infinitive, which means we have the infinitive form of the verb without to. This is called a bare infinitive. I will open the window, not I will to open. It's I will open. And also it's worth noting that when people are speaking, you will probably hear the contracted form of he'll buy, they'll pay, I'll open. The will gets contracted onto the subject. Here's another way of talking about the future, the going to structure. I'm going to buy a car. They are going to build a house. She is going to study medicine. Again, we have contracted forms. I am is probably I'm going to buy a car. They're going to build a house. And she's going to study. So the verb to be is often contracted onto the subject. And when people are speaking, you often hear going to pronounced gonna. People say, I'm going to buy a car. They're going to build a house. She's going to study medicine. It's a contracted form that you don't often see written unless you are looking at the lyrics of songs. You sometimes see it written. But it's very common in pronunciation to say, I'm going to buy a car. The next one is the present continuous. We are visiting the in-laws. The in-laws are your mother-in-law and father-in-law. I'm having my hair cut. She is taking the dog to the vet. And again, we are, we're, I am, I'm, she is, she's. The verb to be will take a contracted form quite often. And of course, this is a present continuous. So how do we know it's actually referring to the future? Because normally there will be something in the sentence which tells you. For example, on Tuesday, we are visiting the in-laws. Or it will be in the context of the conversation. If somebody says, for example, do you want to come to the football match on Saturday? Somebody could then say, I am having my hair cut. Then we automatically know it's a future because somebody mentioned on Saturday. So there will always be some sort of context that puts it into the future. A similar thing when we're talking the present simple. We know it's in the future because of the context. The train leaves at 9:15. We arrive in Athens on Tuesday. The film starts at 8 o'clock. So you can see each of these sentences has a time frame, 8:15 Tuesday, 8 o'clock, which all refer to the future. And you can see the context of these is always some kind of timetables or schedules. So the first example is some sort of train timetable or buses or aeroplanes. we arrive in Athens is some sort of itinerary of a tour or a cruise. The film starts at 8 o'clock is like TV schedules or cinema timetables, something like that. So the present simple is normally used for some sort of timetable. Here we have an unusual one, be plus to infinitive. Now you're not going to hear this in conversation very much, but if you watch the news in English, you will see things like this. The President is to speak in the Parliament. The Queen is to visit Berlin. The prize is to be presented tonight. So it's quite often used in the more formal context of the news, talking about official functions, let's say official functions. It's actually very similar to the going to structure with the going missing. So if you say the Queen is to visit Berlin, you could say the Queen is going to visit Berlin. The structure is very similar. So you won't actually hear this in conversation very often. The final one there, the prize is to be presented, that is actually a passive structure as well. So we have will, we have the going to structure, the present continuous, the present simple, be plus a to infinitive. So the final two, the present simple and the be plus to infinitive, are quite specific in when they are used, so we can remove those. Now the first three here are used in certain situations, but remember with English grammar that it's not exactly specific rules of when we use them. It's only tendencies. So the people that study grammar have looked at the way English speaking people use these phrases, and they found that in certain situations there are tendencies to use one rather than the other. But like I say, they're not specific rules that we have to follow. It's only a tendency. This is the way English grammar tends to work. So let's look at the difference between will and when we use the going to structure for talking about the future. One thing you'll notice is that the will tends to be in very spontaneous situations, whereas the going to tends to be more planned. So here are some examples of when we may use them. Now, if somebody said, I will buy a car, this is not grammatically incorrect, but it's a very unusual sentence to say because the will structure tends to be more spontaneous. So people would probably say, I am going to buy a car because it's an intention for the future. I will buy a car sounds like a spontaneous decision, and you generally don't wake up in the morning with the idea of, oh, I think I'll buy a car today, as a spontaneous decision. There tends to be quite a lot of thinking and planning before you buy a car. So the going to structure sounds a lot more usual in this sense. Whereas the opposite thing happens here. I'm going to open the window is a structure that grammatically is correct, but it would be very unusual because the going to tends to have some sort of plan that somebody's been thinking about it for a long time. So you would probably hear, I'll open the window. When we use this will structure, even though it's the most simple form to use, it's actually not that common. And it's used in these spontaneous events. Well, for example, if somebody says, oh, it's hot in this room, you think, I'll open the window. Yeah, so you think it, you say it, and then you do it, all almost at the same time. Whereas if somebody said, I am going to open the window, it sounds like they have a previous plan, like they've already been thinking about it. But you don't generally wake up in the morning and think about opening the window in the afternoon. And you don't, on Monday, think about opening the window on Thursday. So, I'm going to open the window sounds rather unusual. And you will probably say, I'll open the window. Now, the going to and the present continuous. Now, these are very, very similar in when we use them, and people have analysed the way we speak and they've decided that going to is more of an intention. Present continuous is more like a fixed plan. Now, someone once described it as the present continuous would be used for things that you would write in an agenda. So if you write in your agenda of things you have to do, dentist 4 o'clock Tuesday, then when you tell someone about it, you would probably use the present continuous form. So here are some examples that we used before. You see all of these: I'm going to buy a car, they're going to build a house, she's going to study medicine. Sometime in the future. We don't have a specific day and time when they're going to happen. They are an intention for the future. Whereas these, we are visiting the in-laws, I'm having my hair cut, she's taking the dog to the vet, are referring to specific days or even specific times on the days. So it's much more fixed exactly when it's going to happen. But again, it's a tendency, it's not a rule that we follow. It's just that when it's a more specific time, we tend to use the present continuous. Now here we are looking at predictions. We can use the will and the going to make predictions. And again, people have analysed why we use one in one situation and one in the other. And they've decided that will is when we have experience. We're basing our prediction on experience, whereas the going to is more based on evidence. Here we've got some more examples. Don't lend him your car, as he will probably crash it. So this prediction is based on the fact that I know what this person is like. I know he's a crazy driver and he's always having accidents. So I'm saying, don't lend him your car, as he will probably crash it. Whereas if I was in this situation, an animal runs into the road, or we drive through a lot of water or something, look out, you're going to crash. This prediction is made on the evidence that I can see in front of me. Again, it's a tendency, but in these situations I would probably use one rather than the other. Here's another example. You should take a jacket because it will be cold. Now imagine your friend is going up the mountain. It might be a nice sunny day in the valley, but you know that up the mountain it's considerably colder. So you say to your friend, you should take a jacket because it will be cold. This is based on my experience of going up mountains. Or if you're on the beach and your friend is going out in a boat, you know from previous experience that when you're out on the ocean, it's considerably cooler than when you're lying on the beach in the sun. So based on experience. Whereas this, I think it's going to rain. You've seen some black clouds. The temperature has suddenly dropped. And you know from this evidence that you can see that that is what is going to happen. So you would tend to say it's going to rain rather than it will rain. Now in some situations they can be very, very similar and difficult to say what the difference is. The first thing you'll notice is that I use the singular verb and the plural verb with athletic. Athletic is a football team. Some people think of a football team as one thing. Some people think of it as 11 players. So sometimes some people use singular verbs and some people use plural. The same thing can happen with groups of people, like pop groups, for example, musicians, whether it's one group or 5 musicians, and the same with family. Some people say my family is, some people say my family are. But apart from that, we're looking at will and going to. Now both these sentences are, of course, are correct grammatically. If I use will, it's probably based on experience. Going to is probably based on the evidence. So I might use the first sentence if I'm making the prediction based on the way this team have been playing this season. So the evidence of my experience this season tells me that they will win. The second one, I think I might say during the match, if I can actually see in front of me that they are playing very well, then I might use the second one with going to. But to be honest, they're very, very similar, and I don't think anybody would notice if you use one or the other. So there you are. Will, going to, present continuous, present simple, and that rather unusual be plus to infinitive. 5 different ways of talking about the future in different situations. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below if you've got any suggestions for new videos. And don't forget, every Sunday we have our Round the Table broadcast for you to listen to. Hope you enjoyed that, and see you soon.